Good afternoon. Welcome to today's Professional Series webcast brought to you by the MSU Alumni Association. My name is Lisa Parker, and I am the Director of Alumni Career and Business Services for the MSU Alumni Association. We offer the Professional Series webcast the second and fourth Thursday of the month, covering a variety of topics designed to help you as an individual, as a professional, as a business. And with the exception of November and December, of course, because of the holidays, we will only be offering a cast the second Thursday. Joining us today is a wonderful Spartan who's actually assisted us with presentations in the past, Lew Dotterer. Lew is an expert in organizational change. In fact, from 2007 to 2012, he actually assisted Michigan State as a consultant for change management. He served as the Director of Learning and Organizational Development from 1995 to 2007 for Sparrow. He's a certified coach for social and emotional intelligence. He earned his Ph.D. from Michigan State in 1989 in adult learning and organizational development, and his master's from Michigan State prior to that in counseling. So Lew brings a wealth of knowledge and shares it in a very approachable way. Before I turn the stage over to Lew, I want to offer to you as participants that this webcast is recorded today. If you would like a copy of the recording, you are welcome to email Brenda Haynes, whose email appears in our chat area. Lew will also be taking questions during the cast if it's a convenient time to stop for a question. If not, it will be addressed before we conclude our webcast today. You may share your questions in the chat area of this webcast located on the left side of the screen. And to input your question, there is a bar at the bottom of that chat box that you type into. So without further ado, Lew, I would like to turn the microphone over to you, and thank you for joining us today for A Penny for Your Thoughts, turning change into...
Thanks, Lisa. It's great to be here. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk with the group about change management. And just as we start, if we look at the screen and we see the first slide, obviously I've tried to make the simple connection to the concept of change, but also with that realization that when we look at change, we need to pay attention to our thought process, which can have a significant impact on how we choose to deal with a change. And so given that, I'd like to move forward, and whenever it's appropriate, if you have questions, please, as Lisa pointed out, feel free to ask. It will give me an opportunity to stop and breathe and to also address your questions. As we start here, our focus today, there are so many different aspects of change. I've decided to focus more on the personal side of change. That has implications for work, it has implications obviously for your private life, etc. But change is ever present. And so we will look at some of the main concepts of how to respond to change, but focus extensively on our personal side of that factor and equation. Really pay attention also to what we can do about change. And so I would first ask you to think about what's changing around you. And there can be quite a few things. Obviously, even in our personal life, we have things like our jobs can change, new roles, responsibilities, roles not just in the workplace, but also roles in terms of our personal life. Maybe we've just gotten married. Maybe we had just recently our first baby, and so we have new roles of being a spouse or being a mother or father, and so that would be a change. Our physical health can be changing as well. Going to the doctor and hearing that if we don't make some changes, we will perhaps experience diabetes, for example, or something like that. That is something that a change might be very desired for us. And so physical health can change. Life events, things going on in our families' lives can certainly have an impact on us. The loss of a significant person in our life, where we are now in a grieving process, can promote significant change. Going back to the workplace, if our company has merged with another organization, that's a change because it might have an impact on us. And then the final bullet here in terms of the world around us and all of the changes going on, what we read in the paper, here on the news, whatever it might be, there is significant change going on around us that we respond to with our thoughts, emotions, etc. So, there are several definitions to change. The ones that I'm using two. One by William Bridges in his tremendous book called Transitions. Change is an event. It is situational and it's outside of us. And so think of change as an external event or situation. Something starts and something stops. And so with that, think of it as almost if you have a very tranquil, peaceful pond and you drop a rock in the pond, that initial plop is the event. That's the change itself. We're changing the pond by dropping a rock in it. And then we think about the ripples being the ongoing effect on us as a result of that change. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. Examples, like I've already mentioned before, a new job. Someone retires, birth of a baby, marriage, a physical exam, new products coming to market that have an impact on us, especially if we were the ones being asked to bring them to market. The dehiring of an individual can certainly have an impact on us if we were the one being dehired. Or as a result of a merger, we find that there's no need for two people doing the same role, and therefore we are not going to be moving forward with the new organization. Those changes can have significant, obviously, impact on us. More about the change process. It is a time of disorientation and reorientation, and this concept comes from Brides and Schlossberg. And keep in mind that we react internally to that external change, that external plot. And that change requires a change in our perception of ourselves and our world. We think of ourselves differently when we experience change. I know that when I was working with an organization and they implemented significant new changes in software that affected payroll, HR, and finance systems in the organization, that some people certainly started thinking of themselves differently. They started to realize that their expertise and competence now was potentially coming into question because they no longer knew how to do their job, because their job had changed significantly. And that is a major issue that we do need to pay attention to, is this disorientation. We're no longer in sync with what we have gotten accustomed to. This change has caused us to look at ourselves and each other differently. And so given that, another part of this whole process is this issue that Bridges and others talk about in terms of transition. Transition is different than change. Transition is the psychological or internal reorientation that happens inside of us as we adapt to that external change. So if we lose our job, as an example, that's the external change. How we cope with it, how we react to that, is the internal transition process. It is a process too. We might start with anger, fear, or denial, and then go through the series of changes, oftentimes very similar to Kubler-Ross's stages of grieving. But along with that, we do reorient ourselves to a new way. As we start to become aware of what a new way might be for us, we oftentimes have to decide what that new way is. But the reorientation requires a change, and that to me is so important. To cope with change, we have to change. We change our beliefs and our assumptions and then our behaviors. And we really need to do this so that we can adapt to this change. Whether it's a job, whether it's a role, whatever the change might be, we have to look at ourselves differently. We have to look at our world a little differently for us to be able to either grow or deteriorate. And the choices we make will help us go one direction or the other. And obviously what I want to encourage all of us to do is to find the ways to help us grow in times of change. It's for sure that change can be scary. When we lose a job, and again, that example is the one that comes to mind. When we do lose a job, for example, it's scary to think about what we're going to do now, especially if you add to that, well, the person is 55 and they're not going to be maybe as successful in a job search as they would like to be and staying in a certain area. And so given all of those factors, the change can be very scary, but how we react to it, which we'll talk about in a second, will have a significant impact. This is something that I do focus on extensively, is the control piece. You can't control the circumstances that brought on the change, but we can control how we respond to that change. And that's where the power is, that's where the energy is in our response. If we continue to focus on the change itself, we oftentimes can start to feel like a victim. And we usually have a difficult time mobilizing our energy and our resources and our creativity when we're feeling like a victim. And so what I encourage us to do is to figure out what we still have control over and use and work towards that. Your greatest source of security in your life is your ability to deal with change. And really the choice is ours on what we choose to focus on. Something that we can control or something we wish had not happened to us. Wishing won't change it, as you know. So in times of change, one thing I've learned is that we lose sight of our goodness. We oftentimes forget about our esteem. We feel like we no longer are competent. And again, given we've done this job for 10, 15, 20 plus years, and now that job no longer exists, what now? And the job that maybe we are going to be asked to do or we have to train to become competent at, we feel very incompetent right now in doing it. And so we oftentimes have tied our whole self-worth to the work that we do. And it does cause us to feel uncomfortable about who we are. And so our goodness can come into question. This is pretty normal. We forget what we're good at. Our self-esteem is hidden from us. And so in times of change, we need to realize that these kinds of things happen, and we have to figure out what can we do about it. What can we do for ourselves? Or if we're helping other people through the change. As we experience unhappiness, one of the things that is an option, I'm not saying it's the one to work towards, but and I do use the words carefully, choosing unhappiness. Many people in times of change choose unhappiness over uncertainty. Now think about that phrase, to choose unhappiness over uncertainty. And what I mean by that is, and I've seen several people, and I don't want to beat the horse of losing a job, but this is just an example I talk with people about on a very regular basis. When the person does lose a job, what they oftentimes will do is start to look for other jobs within the same organization, which again could be great, that could be wonderful, but they don't stop to think about, I've been complaining about this organization for years. And so they are more comfortable in being unhappy than they are in maybe the uncertainty of what if I was to look for a job in another organization, or what if I was to consider self-employment, or whatever the options might be. So be aware for yourself that sometimes people will choose to be, it's easier to be unhappy than it is to be uncertain. I hope that makes sense. Questions on that? The question is, do I think people are always aware they are presenting as unhappy? I don't. I think sometimes we have gotten into a routine, and we might say instead of it being unhappy, it's realistic. And so one of the things that is critical, and we'll see this described a little bit later in the session, is I'll talk about ways that you take care of yourself, and one is to have a support group. You need to have other people around you who really know who you are and could provide you with feedback to let you know, wow, in the last month or two you have gotten really negative, or have you listened to yourself? And because sometimes we need a mirror. We become comfortable with practice what we're doing, and it sort of becomes the new us, whether that's a good thing or not. So it's a great question. I don't think we're always aware that we're presenting unhappy, but we do need people around us to be that mirror to help us understand, and help us hear how we're coming across. It can be a gradual shift for sure. Fear does get in the way of us taking courageous action. We can become very limiting to ourselves in terms of what we choose to do going forward. Fear can also inflate obstacles. If we start to look at options with whatever the change is and we start to think about, well, what could I do instead, sometimes the obstacles of either having to go back to school or having to move, and you can think of those changes that you would have to do, they can become very dramatic. And sometimes, I'm not saying it's not real, but sometimes the fear inflates those obstacles. And if I know that that's going on, then maybe I can look at this situation a little bit differently and maybe not have the fear inflating the obstacles so much. Many of you perhaps over the years or years ago read a little book called Who Moved My Cheese? And one of the takeaways for me from that little book was the question that was asked, what would I do if I wasn't afraid? I think that's really one of the great questions in change management, as simple as it sounds. But it does help me to realize that perhaps I am dealing with some fear as it pertains to change. Will I be hired in a new job? Will I like the job? Will I be successful in doing the job? Whatever, again, the fear items might be, it can immobilize me and paralyze me emotionally. But if I can answer that, I'd be inclined to make that move if I wasn't afraid. And a question that comes up, a good question here, is have I found that people are able to answer the question? I think they can. Oftentimes, again, this is where we need some help once in a while. Whether it's an objective third party or a friend, someone that can sit down with us and listen to us and help us listen to ourselves. I think it's a great question, and again, you might have to revisit the question a few times, in which you are asking it on different occasions, and maybe the answer changes a little bit too. But that's one of the things that, again, people who, I'm involved a lot with coaching individuals, one of the things we do quite a bit is to get people to think about, if that fear wasn't there, what would be in my future? And that can help us to uncover some new opportunities. Okay, another question. Thank you for this. Is what would they do if they weren't afraid, if they hadn't acknowledged that they were afraid? And that's, to me, a real important point, is just to at some point take a step back. Once you're experiencing change, take a step back and say, where is the fear? Is there fear for me in this process? Am I afraid of anything going forward? And to just be willing to consider the option that fear is a pretty normal part of the change process. It's pretty normal to have some fear as I start to venture into the unknown of the future. And so maybe it won't be debilitating. Maybe it's going to be exciting. And that can be how I choose to look at it. And so, but I think it's important to take that step back and ask oneself, okay, if fear is in my life now, how is it having an impact on what I look at, how I define things, or what I'm choosing to do? And then another question. Okay, that's the same question. Okay, good. If there's any other questions, feel free to shoot them forward here. They're great questions. Wonderful. Let me go on a little bit. And so I would refer you to the little book, Who Moved My Cheese, but to be just aware of that issue of fear. And how does fear come into play? I'm not saying it's unrealistic, because it can be very realistic. But at the same time, then we can oftentimes turn that fear into action. If I'm afraid that I'm not going to find a new job, what am I going to do to better the chances of finding new employment, whether it's working in an organization, self-employment, or what my options might be? Do I have to dust off a resume? Do I have to practice interviewing? Do I have to start to work with my social network? Whatever it might be, what are the action items that need to occur next? Which, by the way, will have a positive impact on fear once I start to do those things. Now, another option, again, I'm not saying it's the one to go for, but sometimes in times of change there is some pain. It can be pain of loss in terms of I'm no longer doing this role, I'm no longer experiencing this salary, or there can be pain of regret because I don't take advantage of opportunities to maybe do something new or different or come out of that comfort zone. Comfort zone, I don't talk about it much on the slides, but it's very pervasive. We like to be comfortable. We like to be comfortable. And certainly if we get into a routine where we've worked in the same organization or in the same relationship for years, there is a sense of comfort. And so now, if I have the loss because that relationship is no longer there or that work is no longer there, I certainly would have some pain again of loss and maybe like Kubler-Ross, the stages of grieving. But sometimes there can also be a pain of regret by not trying something new. And which pain is worse? If I look back in 30 years, will I regret having lost a role, or would I have greater discomfort in I never tried this, or I never came out of my comfort zone to try that? And so one of the things to think about is what can I do so there won't be regret? Can I look forward and again see where's the passion, where's the excitement, where's the energy with this opportunity, and what can I do to move forward? Now that sounds very naive potentially, because right now maybe I've lost something really important to me and I'm not going to be enthused about this opportunity. But what can I do to work towards that, because I need to mobilize myself to action and move forward. And we'll talk about why in just a moment. There was a few years ago, I noticed in Lansing, when I would drive around, there was a realty company, and this might have been going on nationally, and I just wasn't getting out much, but in the Lansing area, a real estate company had signs that they put on the front yards of many of their houses, and the signs read INNW. And I couldn't figure out what INNW meant. I did a little research and found that it stood for, if not now, when? And so obviously the real estate company was saying, if you don't buy a house now, when do you think you're going to? And isn't this the best time? Strike while the iron is hot, if you will. Well, Hillel the Elder, by the way, was the person that's credited with having made this statement. Hillel the Elder, if that is anything of interest to you. Anyway, that this is really one of the early points associated with change management. If not now, excuse me, when I am dealing with this change in my life, what can I do to take advantage of this opportunity, to make the most of it, to explore new strengths, to obtain new knowledge? If not now, when? And so one of the things I would ask you to think about as we look at this whole process of change is there an opportunity here? Again, if I'm in the midst of anger or fear or a grieving process, certainly it's going to be tough to answer, yes, there's a great opportunity here. But that's why, again, maybe to bounce some ideas off of an objective third party or a close friend could help me in realizing, there is a corner to turn here, and I could actually see this in a different light. And we'll need to talk about how we can do that. And so, to move forward, I'm just reading to see if there are any other questions. Okay. What I'm suggesting is, with this, if not now, when, if this is a good opportunity, and if I can see it as an opportunity, maybe I need to acquire some skills and build on the competencies I have to become what's called a change agent. Now, not so much the change agent that's described here in this slide, but it's not the angel of death kind of thing. It really is helping me come up with new ways to address the change and to have it not become such a negative where it's debilitating, but really to take advantage of the opportunities that I now have, whatever the change might be. So given that, there are some change agent actions. There are things that the research indicates too, that if people do these kinds of things, this can only help you continue to move. And mobility is a critical factor in times of change, that you're continuing to move forward towards a goal. A lot of times we stall, or we start to sink or actually regress. And what we want to do is to continue to move forward. These change agent actions, we have some of these strengths already, whether we're dealing with a lot of change or not. What we can do is build on the strengths of these competencies and even add to it. So let's go through these for a few minutes. The first one is, as you can tell, the importance of attitude. I have to be in control of my attitude. I have to carry my own weather around with me. Can't blame the dark skies, the rain, the clouds, whatever, for my, again, how I'm feeling right now, unless you have seasonal affective issues. But I think the point is, my attitude I carry with me, and I need to decide to be positive today, to make the most out of the opportunities that I have. It sounds so trite, and I apologize for that, but we find that positive attitude will help us move in this positive direction. And people who have more of a positive attitude can deal with change a lot differently than people whose attitude is more negative, for example. Again, people who are not just having a bad day, but those having a bad decade. And again, it's tough. And so what I want to do is to encourage people as much as possible to have that positive attitude about themselves and their life. Own the change. This one is important too, in the sense of I've seen people work hard at denying the change actually is occurring in their life. Real example. When I was working with an employee assistance program, we had a contract with a company who they had decided that they were going to be moving part of their business from the Lansing area to North Dakota. And they had met with all of their staff. They had talked about when the change was going to occur, months from that date. And they had three options. The employees, could be moved to the new location by this organization, all expenses paid, and they would have a job, same job, basically a new environment. Second option, find a new position in the Lansing area with the rest of the organization that was going to stay in Lansing. Third option, the company would help you put your resume together and find a job in another organization, maybe in the Lansing area. Three options. And we had two people who, months later, when the moving vans actually were pulling up to this organization, two people said, we didn't know anything about this change, this is the first we've heard of it, and they were actually in that meeting months earlier. They never owned the change. They never put into practice thinking about what it would be like to move to that new state, or thinking about looking for opportunities elsewhere in the company, or putting a resume together to find a job elsewhere. They never owned it. And when you don't own the change, then it's easier to become the victim. And so we need to own the change and get to the point, and this is part of maybe the grieving process as well, and also the transition process of getting to the point of acceptance, that yes, it's happening. I wish it hadn't, I wish it wasn't going to, but it is. And so moving beyond wishing to, it is a reality. Now what can I do? Can't control it, the decision's been made. I can control my reactions. Know your options. That's important as well in terms of and let me stop before I go on to that. There's a question here. What if I'm working underneath someone who hasn't owned the change happening in your organization? That's a great question. If I'm working for someone who is either in denial or who is not helping the rest of the staff and the team look at the reality, I think I need to continue to ask the questions about that will help me experience reality, either of the person I'm working for, or else maybe CC them and send my questions elsewhere in the organization so that I can actually get answers. And I don't want to work around them, but I want to get the answers to the questions that I need so that I can accept that reality. And it's true that sometimes we can work for individuals who struggle more with the change reality because of what the implication might be for them as well. So it's not an easy question. By the way, the question does remind me that many of the concepts that we're talking about this afternoon we could elaborate on in a slightly different or bent, I should say, if I happen to be a supervisor or a manager. It's what I can do not only for myself, but also for the people who work with me. But today, again, we're focusing more on you as an individual. So if I work for somebody that's struggling with change, who else in the organization might have the knowledge that I can ask? And again, include my supervisor or boss in conversation, but still strive to get the answers. And so know my options. What are my options? Are my options in terms of the employment to look for other employment within the organization if they have de-hired me or said, we don't need two people in this merger doing this role. Lew, we're not going to move you forward in this process. You can work in this other department for half the salary. And I have to know my options. The option would be to take that, maybe to apply elsewhere in the company or to look elsewhere in other organizations, self-employment, whatever it might be. What are my options? If I don't know, who do I need to talk with to find out what my options might be? And again, sometimes fear will keep me from seeing options. I go back to that, but sometimes fear causes me to wear blinders a little bit. I need to reduce the fear so I can see all my options. Some of them I might not like because it might mean I have to change, but I need to know what they are. In times of change, we also encourage the change agents to be very tolerant of mistakes and errors, your own as well as others. If you have, the way that you're coping with change is to learn a new job, for example, you're going to be putting a lot of energy into enhancing your skill sets. And so you're not going to be perfect, typically, from day one. You have a learning curve. Be tolerant of that learning curve. Give yourself a little extra patience. Or if you're working with somebody else right next to an individual who has been paralyzed with fear, but they're trying to acquire new skill sets, can I be tolerant of their attempts as well? Obviously, if I am a manager and the person is making a lot of mistakes, I need to track those at some point, but also still be tolerant of them, the individual, see if there's other ways I can build a safety net to help them practice and learn the new behaviors, whatever those might be. But be tolerant of your own humanness at times of change. Again, this can help us with our esteem, that's for sure. The next point I would add, sense of humor. I really would emphasize that a lot. That sounds, again, maybe so simple, but I have to be able to laugh in times of change. And I don't mean hysterical laughter at maybe inappropriate times, but I need to be able to laugh either at myself, some of my own thoughts, not anyone else being the butt of jokes or whatever, but I need to maintain a sense of humor to help me get a perspective to look at situations realistically. And I think humor can balance that a lot. So be sure that you can spend some time with other individuals and do some laughing. It can also physiologically have a great impact on us in releasing chemicals, etc. Don't let my strengths become weaknesses. That might sound a bit odd, but if any of you are familiar with the DISC, a survey behavioral style survey that we use in a lot of different educational programs, one of the quadrants, and they're all great in terms of strengths that each quadrant possesses, but for example, maybe part of my strength is in my ability to establish goals and work towards the accomplishment of goals. And if that's a strength, and that's great to stay zero focused, focused totally on reaching goals. But can I ever strive to reach goals too much or to too much of a degree where I no longer am concerned about or pay attention to the impact on others of us working towards a goal? If I'm really focused on we have to hit this target by the end of October, and that might mean that I need all of my staff to work into the evening, early morning, and on the weekends, and there's not going to be this holiday time or whatever it might be, I am not paying attention maybe to what the fallout and impact would be on the humans that I work with, just because I'm focusing so much on the goal of trying to accomplish something. And so sometimes my strengths can become a weakness. One of my strengths is to be a listener, and I can be really good at listening. Can I ever listen too much? Absolutely. at some point I probably need to disclose something or share a thought or a feeling. If I just focus on my strength of listening, I'm only doing the one-way piece and I'm not doing the other. And so what are my strengths? But maybe I take my strengths to an extreme sometimes, and I need to just be aware of that. When we talk about practicing healthy stress management processes and practices, there are basically 5 ways, and I won't elaborate on them extensively, but there are 5 ways to build resistance to stress in times of change. 5 ways to build resistance to stress in times of change. The first way is through proper sleep. Just getting the right amount of sleep can be of help to me. The second way is eating right. Eating the right foods, right quantities, right time of day or night, whatever it might be. The third factor is exercise. Do something physically. You know that if you're dealing with significant changes, we can store a lot of tension in the body. And we need to find healthy outlets for that, and so exercise would be a part of that. So, sleep, nutrition, exercise. The fourth is to have relaxation techniques. Specific ways where we can do deep breathing, where we can do autogenic training, where with practice you can have a kind of a guided imagery experience in your mind, and it can help you relax. Muscle relaxation, where we can realize where we store tension and relax those muscles. A lot of different, and yoga can be a part of that as well. So we have relaxation techniques, which is different than sleeping. And then the fifth way to build resistance to stress is through having a support group. And I've talked about this earlier. The importance of individuals in our life who are doing better than we are. People who we can go to and risk with and talk with and share our feelings with, and who they are very comfortable in being that mirror and pointing out what they're seeing, how I'm not taking care of myself like I used to, or I'm not engaging others like I used to. I've lost my sense of humor. We need to have those people who can be the reality anchors in times of change, because otherwise we can drift off course for sure. So those 5 ways can help us to practice healthy stress management concepts. Again, proper sleep, nutrition, exercise, relaxation techniques, and a support group. Any of those, or all 5 of those, could be a session in and of itself. So I just wanted to introduce you to those 5 ways for stress management that you have control over. Again, I hope there are some of those that you are doing extremely well in your life right now. And maybe there's one that you can add to your life a little bit more. You can fine-tune it and be even more effective. If you look at that list of 5 and say, I don't do any of those, then you would have to significantly change your life in order to start doing those. And that could be a major stressor in and of itself. By the way, with any of these change agent actions, add to those that you are already doing that you consider to be strengths. And so you might not be doing this whole list, but is there one that you could work on? Don't feel like you have to take on all of these. That's overwhelming, that's for sure. And by doing the factors that I've just talked about on this slide, it gets me then to where I can invent the future. And this is so critical because it helps by doing these things, by my attitude, about taking care of myself, by being tolerant of my own errors. I then have much more tolerance for and a willingness to look down the road to what might be, and to actually think about what would be my passion, what's my interest, what have I only toyed with in terms of thinking about, and have never really allowed myself to establish as a goal, to work towards, to make happen. Because maybe I didn't quite believe in myself enough, or maybe I was so comfortable in working for others now to think about working for myself. That is really getting me out of my comfort zone, but you know what? Maybe now's the time. And so what's the future I want? And if I create that future, what am I going to do to make it successful and to be successful in the future? So those are some of the things associated with the change agent, and we'll talk about a few more in just a moment. But invent the future also helps me to get away from the past. And now, like this person, this is not the way we really become a change agent. You might know some individuals who they put a lot of energy in sticking their head in the sand in hopes that when they pull their head out, whatever it was that was a change has disappeared, is no longer there, or never was. that very seldom happens. And so we don't want to put our energy into that pose. It just leaves too much at risk. And so we're talking about doing some other kinds of things. And a few other practices that I have already mentioned, being the open-minded individual, being open to a new way of doing things, or taking on a new role. Those kinds, that being open-minded can be extremely helpful, so that I can come up with a new alternative, a new future. Otherwise, I might be inclined to make the same, I don't want to say same mistakes, but I might be inclined to look for something that I used to be doing, and you know what, maybe there aren't very many companies using that skill anymore. My oldest sister, real quick story, she used to be a teletype operator for Union Carbide. A teletype operator. And then, you know what, they had the audacity to invent computers. And she had been probably the best teletype operator in the Union Carbide division in the Midwest. And she'd been told this. Now she was given a computer. She didn't have a clue what to do with that thing. And so she had to get a lot of training to reduce the fear. She had to be open-minded to realizing, you know what, I could try to find a company that needed a teletype operator, and I might be able to find one and have another career for another couple of years, but you know what, probably they'll go to computers too. So at some point, being open-minded to realize what is and what can be is extremely important. Now, another skill that change agents have, we need to be able to restore our own esteem. There will be other individuals out there who will maybe try to knock us down. There will be some other opportunities in which we have lost sight of our goodness. We are now doing a new role. We don't have a clue how to turn on the machine to do it, or we've never done this work before. And so we're not feeling real good about the skills that we have because we no longer have the skills to be successful because the whole thing has changed. But you know what? I have to be able to restore my own esteem. I can't wait for someone to do it for me. Think about that. How do you restore your own esteem? How do you restore your goodness in times of change? You need to have specific practices, specific ways to enhance your esteem. Whether it's, here's a simple thing, have a list of your greatest hits in terms of things that you do well. And have that list laminated, put it or come up with a new list every year of new accomplishments, new greatest hits, volume 2 and 3, etc. But have easy access to those lists so that you can remind yourself on those tough days what some of your goodness is about. And but find other ways to restore your esteem. Do for others. Another way to enhance your esteem is to take time for yourself to recharge your batteries. Get the right amount of sleep. Like we talked about before, some of those factors will tie into how we look at ourselves when we look in our psychological mirror. Be a learner, not a judger. What I mean by that is be open to learning new information about yourself, about the work you need to do. Once you've embraced the change, what am I going to do to acquire the knowledge and skills in order to be effective in doing it, if that's the decision I've made? Don't be a judge or trying to figure out who do I blame for the decision being made that we now have a new system. Once you figure out who to blame, it doesn't matter. You still have to change. And so personal discipline, accountability. This is tremendously important. This is also a presentation in and of itself, in my opinion. The whole point about how do I hold myself accountable. If I see something, I need to own it. I need to figure out what to do about it, and then I need to implement and do something. Take action. And so there's no blame in accountability. I know people put a lot of energy in trying to figure out whose fault is this. You know what? At some point, it doesn't matter. What matters is what I'm going to do about myself in this environment. And so put my energy where it really will make a difference. Figure out through see, own, solve, and then do. Be a risk taker. Here we go. Come out of our comfort zone a little bit. At times, I need to. Because staying in the comfort zone is not going to help me get to where I need to go in terms of the future. And that's where we're headed. If we are not evolving, if we're not growing, we might be going stagnant and going more towards the past. So the change agent is moving forward. Certainly there are bumps in the road for a change agent, but he or she has a good understanding that they're going in the right direction, and they have some other people around them who will also provide some support and suggestions to them. Yeah. So I think that's important. I'm going to actually skip the next two slides. Talk about how we can help ourselves in times of change, and we can also help each other. It shows us a process very similar to Kubler-Ross's, and what I would point out is when dealing with either for myself or someone else, if they're denying or if they're putting energy into not accepting the reality of a change, we need to carefront the denial, not confront. And to carefront means to show that I still care about you as a person, and so to show that I care about me as a person. How do I do self-care? Because that will build my confidence and esteem. And so I've just tried to provide you a couple of ideas here to help other individuals in case there were questions about how does this apply to other individuals. But I am very conscious of the time and want to make sure that we talk more about taking care of ourselves in times of change. So now to focus on now what. If we've gotten to the point of identifying the change, we understand the transitional component of what's going on within us in times of change, whether it's the fear, whether it's the resistance, whatever might be going on for us. What am I now going to do once I've embraced the realization that change is occurring? And can I, through my positive attitude, realize the opportunities that might now be before me? I'm going to change the world, and this is my plan. What's that plan going to look like? Here are some questions that I will leave you with, but I want you to, any of these can take a long time in thinking through. They're not real quick 30-second questions and answers and then moving on. But what's the change that I want to focus on? The way I've described it this afternoon, it almost sounds like one change occurs at a time, and it's never that smooth. A lot of times we change something that's going on at work, or my work has changed, something changes at home, something changes in terms of my car breaks down, whatever it might be. So there could be a lot of changes occurring simultaneously. So what's the one that I want to focus on first? What can I control? This, to me, critical question. What actions do I need to take? Do I have an idea of what I need to do different? Do I need to prepare a resume? Do I need to start to reach out to a support group? Do I need to reach out to see who would be a business coach that could help me? Of course, I'm biased along those lines since I do that work. But anyway, what do I need to start doing, and what do I need to stop doing? If I've had a heart-to-heart conversation with my physician and my doc is telling me, Lou, you have to make some lifestyle changes because the numbers are not good here. Okay, so what do I need to start doing? What is it about the exercise program? What else do I need to start doing? And then what do I need to stop doing? Change certain intake of food. Start taking some certain kinds of vitamin supplements, or for example, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what are the starting to-dos and the stopping doings that will make a difference dealing with the change of having talked with my doc, for example? A little bit more. Do I need do I need to ask others to help me? This is tough for some people. There are some individuals out there who are very strong. They're like the Rock of Gibraltar, where they are there for anybody. And they will provide support to any person going through a life struggle. You need every once in a while to maybe ask for help yourself. And who do you go to? It feels really different when you're vulnerable than when people around you are vulnerable towards you. So how do you ask for help? And is it okay? I hope it is. We're all human, and so we all need help periodically. The next point, what do I want the future to look like as it pertains to this change? This, to me, is a real important point. Develop that desired future state. What's the future I want to have in my life? Now, again, I can fine-tune that. I can continue to define that future state as I am moving forward. It becomes more crystal clear the more I get involved. Maybe I start to write a resume and I start to identify my skills and competencies. And you know what? There are some other things in terms of life goals that I realize I have, which is going to have an impact on my desired future state. So let me integrate the goals towards that future concept. How do I need to change to make this happen? Here's again the issue associated with change based on our definition from earlier today. To deal with change, I need to change. So how do I need to change to be able to reach the goals in the future that I've established? And then identify what those are and figure out what are the strengths that I possess that I'm going to build on to get to that desired future state. What are my strengths? There's the esteem. There's my goodness. So what are the strengths that I possess so I can move in the desired direction? Those are questions, again, that can help me develop the plan that I want to have. By doing that, by talking with other individuals, I can get a better idea of, again, what I have going on in me, what my fears might be, label the fears, and then figure out some ways to cope and work with those fears and address them. And you know what? Maybe I will have an answer on what to do different than what I am doing. And in that case, I do need to bounce ideas off of somebody else to help me come up with some options that maybe I didn't even know existed. But then I have to be open-minded to considering them. And that is one of the things I do in my work, or when I work with people who are in career transition. One of the things I ask them to do is, can you be open-minded to considering options that you've not explored at this point, or perhaps you've put down in previous conversations with others? Would you be open to coming out of your comfort zone, basically? And if the person says, no, I don't want to come out of my comfort zone, it's going to be harder to come up with new options, necessarily. But if I can say a little bit, I can come out of my comfort zone a little bit for 12 minutes, then that's a start. And maybe we can work up to 15 minutes next time. Anyway, what I've provided you here are a list of some resources, and I will stop because I want to see what questions you might have. Hopefully you do have some other questions. But these resources, Bridges' work, Carlson and Bailey, probably that book is one of the better books, in my opinion, on dealing with stress management and change over the last significant number of years. It's really well done. Ellis's work, he developed a model called ABC, which is really a cognitive or a thought model to help us not blame our change issues and not blame what's going on around us, but to figure out how my thoughts might be causing me some stress and what I can do about that. And I want to change, but I don't know how. And then Xander's book on the art of possibility. Let me stop. Let me see here. We have 7-8 minutes, I think. What kind of questions do people have about the change concept that we've talked about as it pertains to personal change?
And Lew, while we're waiting to see if anybody wants to venture into our chat area, I have a question to start with, perhaps.
Sure.
Hearing about this and thinking about how we can address change effectively is very helpful. But there are likely some of us listening who have already been in the throes of change, who perhaps haven't handled it well. Maybe we've been negative at work going through a transition. Maybe we said some things on Facebook we shouldn't have said after a breakup, or ignored our friends for a period of time after the addition of a child. How do you decide when you just become this smarter person, more intentional person, and move forward, and when you need to go back and maybe repair from mistakes you made in handling change?
That's a great question, Lisa. I think this is always easier to say than it is to do, but for what I like to do is to help people really start to think about, again, what their options are, and when they are able to even consider the option of, I did say something to so-and-so, and that was not the right thing to say, and then if I can figure out what I could say to that person differently, or going forward, what have I learned in the last week or month or whenever, so that I could go back to that person and say, hey, Bill, I want to apologize for what I said or what I did. That was not the way I want to be going forward. I've done some learning. I'm making some changes, and first thing I wanted to do was get back to you and your friendship is important to me, and I want to maintain that and go forward with it. I think we can look back, we can reflect a little bit on where we've been, and if there have been some bumps along the way, which in times of change is going to happen, again, be tolerant of my mistakes, if possible, and then to say, what can I do going forward? Is it through a phone conversation? Is it face-to-face? What can I do? Or maybe it's just been a matter of I have ignored this. I've been like the one slide, I put my head in the sand. Now I've popped my head out and I got to clean off the sand, but you know what? Now it's time to move forward. What am I going to do, and how can I enlist maybe the help of others to do some of this? So I think, Lisa, your question is excellent. I think that once I can remember or catch or find some of those times in my past when maybe I was not the way I would like to be going forward, and I figure there's an action item with that, and it's through humbling myself and being able to say to the other individual, I messed up. And again, that is an action that's critical to take, whether the person accepts your apology, whether they want to continue their friendship. You've done what you can. Again, focus on what you can control. I can't control how the other person responds to me, but I can control my at least stepping towards them with an intent of correcting, apologizing, and building. And once I have that in my heart and my willingness to maybe even practice how I would say it to somebody, and then doing it is a step in the right direction. But keep your eyes forward too. Where am I going? And because sometimes if I keep focusing on my mistakes from the past, I'm never going to be looking ahead. And then it almost feels like I'm trying to drive a car down the highway, but I'm only using my rearview mirror. That's not going to help me get to where I need to go. So I hope that addresses it a little bit, Lisa. Other questions?
That does. I've really appreciated a lot of your content today, Lew, because I think it resonates with a lot of people, and I agree that the control factor is huge, and I think probably what's given change a bit of a bad name of late was how extreme a lot of the change was as we went through this down economy. And now when I'm interacting with job seekers, for example, I'm hearing a lot of conversations about longing for stability, which of course stable means no change, nothing bad, nothing good really. It's just remaining the same. And being able to get back to a place where we don't view change as always being so extreme. And I think in some of the ways that you outlined in terms of taking control of change and what are you going to tackle and what are you going to make new about yourself helps versus change always being a reactionary type thing, kind of late to the game. So have you noticed anything relating, because you've been at this for a long time, have you noticed anything relating to the economic stress that people have been through that have made dealing with change harder?
Well, I think some of the economics, for example, that has been a kind of support foundation for some people when the economics were stronger, when my house was worth more, or when I had more in my retirement fund or whatever, I maybe could tolerate some other stuff a little bit more. But when those foundations started to shake a little bit too, then my whole house, if you will, the symbolism of my house of my life starting to shake a little bit more and just starting to feel a little bit more out of control. And so again, that's why that step back once in a while to figure out what do I still have control over, and then to move forward with that is critical. And the other thing, Lisa, that your question gets me to think about real quick is that I know our conversation today was focusing a lot on, if you will, a negative aspect associated with change. Sometimes the changes going on in our life are wonderful, and just the way that they fall out, it's great stuff. And so I did not probably spend as much time as maybe some people would have liked talking about the great changes that occur, but usually those don't trip us up as much as some of the negative, or more negative ones, I should say, or at least how we choose to look at it in that light. But there are some wonderful things that happen in our life every day too.
I agree with you. I have a twin sister, Lew.